If you've ever wondered how to program drums like a pro, then this video is for you. I'm going to help you level up your house music productions by showing you how to sound like your favourite house tracks. Clean, big, and loads of groove. Let me ask you this, have you ever spent hours on a drum loop only to feel like it's missing something? Maybe it's too flat or the groove just doesn't hit right. I mean, look, it happens to me all the time. It happens to us all. The good news is that we're going to fix that today. There are simple steps you can take to make your drums sounding pro. So I'm going to break down what I call the 5 foundations of groove. By the end of this video, you'll know what to listen for in the groove, but also why the tweaks that I'm going to tell you about can completely transform the energy of your track. Trust me, you'll feel the difference. This isn't about your ears or what's on the screen. You will feel it. This is the secret sauce you need to lock in that groove. Let's dive in. So first up is timing. Timing isn't just about where you put your kick, clap, or hi-hat on the grid. It's about feel. For example, listen to this basic house beat. Got a kick, we've got a clap on the 2 and the 4, and we have a closed hi-hat on the 8th notes. That's it. It doesn't sound great though, does it? And look, on paper, it's all there. You've got the kick on every beat, you've got the clap on the 2 and the 4, and the hi-hats on the 8th notes, but it doesn't really groove. Not yet. Let me show you why. See what happens if I just take the snare and I pull it slightly late, slightly behind the beat. Now, if I go too far, you kind of get that double hit. You don't want that. That's where the kick and the clap are sounding like two sounds. But if you move it just a few milliseconds, even that's too much. See how that has a looser, laid-back feel? The clap is slightly late. And if I pull it the other way, hold on, let me just... If I push it the other way, so slightly early, it feels a bit more rushed, a bit more energetic. And these are very subtle millisecond changes, but you can feel it. You might not be able to see it, you can't really, but you can definitely feel it. So that's rushed. And that's a little bit late, and already it sounds better. Now you can hear how those two beats have a totally different vibe. This subtle technique is called pushing or pulling the backbeat. The backbeat is the 2 and the 4. And here's the crazy part, it doesn't just apply to MIDI. So you could see me moving the notes there, but if you're using samples, you've got to be really careful too, because you can pre-shift them, or the person who's recorded them for you, they might have done it already. And so the next time you're building a groove, experiment with placement and timing. Are your hits relaxed, urgent? Are they locked dead on the grid? Placement makes all the difference. So if you look at the sample we were using for the snare, you can see here, this is actually a proper acoustic snare that's been recorded. And the hit is exactly, there is no delay for the sample. The hit starts as soon as that MIDI note triggers on. If you take another example here, which I've called clap 2, we'll just change them. Now on the MIDI, or clap 2, it is exactly on the grid. If you look at the sample here, and if I zoom in, you see the sample starts here, and there is a transient, but there's also all of this other stuff happening late. So if I play this, it should have the same feel as if you pulled that MIDI note late too. Let's have a listen. See how it feels a little bit lazy? You're sort of waiting for it, and then it comes in. So you've got to be really careful with the samples that you use. Now you can play with this timing on the hi-hats too. So here it's the same beat, but I have 16th high notes, 16th note hi-hats. And This is where people describe this as being robotic. It's very rigid. It's absolutely on the beat. Every 16th note it hits like a machine gun. Generally not considered to sound very good. But if we take every other 16th note and we move it slightly late, you hear that builds in a groove. The more I do it, the more you get. This is on the beat. And that is what groove does. Right, let's stop that. So when your DAW is applying a groove, what it's actually doing is taking every other 16th note and moving it slightly late to create that. So, for example, if I put all of these, quantize them back to the beat, then if I add, I've got two swing 16th here, a 56% and a 76%. So if we go to 56, you hear how you've got the same rhythm that I was doing just by moving the notes. Now, the mistake some people make is applying the groove to a beat that doesn't have any 16th notes. So if we go back to the first beat, where if you look at the MIDI, I have 8th notes, but in between, they're blank. So groove affects these every other 16th notes. So if I apply groove to this, it won't sound any different. So if I apply the groove at the swing 56, there's no change. So you have to understand what groove does, otherwise you might get it wrong. Next, we've got accent. Accent is all about which part of the groove is getting the spotlight. Let's go back to the beat, and I'm going to really emphasize the clap on the 2 and the 4. So all I've done is increase the volume of the snare. And so on the 2 and the 4, that is the driving force. That's the loudest sound in the loop. And that gives it a different feel, even without any other groove. If I do the same thing, but with the kick, you get a different groove. But this time the kick is taking the spotlight. So rather than the 2 and the 4, every quarter note is getting the highlight. So now the kick's driving the groove. So even with the same pattern, just adjusting that accent, that volume, which is just louder or softer, it completely changes the feel of the beat. Hi-hats, same deal. Check it out. If I boost the off-beat hi-hats and soften the ones on the kick, it shifts the focus again. The offbeat, the hi-hats are now the star. Every groove tells a story, and accent decides who's narrating. So ask yourself, what's leading your groove, and does it match the vibe that you're going for? The third foundation is length. How long and strong is each hit? Now this one's underrated, but it's huge. Shape is all about the length and attack of your sounds. Right, let's have a look at this clap. So this is the beat that we had originally, but if I add some reverb to the clap, that will lengthen the sound of that clap. I'm going to go to extremes to illustrate the point. See how the clap is now just dominating the whole groove. So without reverb, a sort of short, snappy sound. And with reverb, just changes which bit of the beat is taking control. Same deal with the hi-hats. So if I go back to the short clap, if I go to the open hi-hat and just extend the decay to lengthen it, so it totally changes it. We have the reverb back in on the clap. Together with a short closed hat. Now, I have not done anything on the timing of those sounds. The clap is, the sample is slightly delayed, so you are getting that, but there's no groove on that sound. And yet, when you play it, just by changing the length of the clap sound and the open hi-hat, that offbeat, you're now getting you're getting a different groove already. It's like an instant energy boost. You've really given the groove more space to breathe, but it's not just about length. It's also about attack. Attack can make a huge difference to the sound. So I've got the original kick, and then I've got an alternative where I've softened the attack of that kick, and just see what difference it makes. That's the original. And that's the softened kick. Actually, why don't so yeah, the first 2 bars will be the soft kick, and the second 2 bars will be the normal one, which has a bit more of a sharp attack. Now, these changes are maybe subtle, but they definitely change the feel of the loop. And they're all tools that you can use to affect your drum groove. The fourth foundation is the sound that you're using, the sonic character of each element. Let's talk about sample selection. The tone of your sounds, whether they're bright, dark, harsh, or soft, has a huge impact on your groove. For example, check out these 2 different snares. We have this one. This is the one I used in the original loop. This is an analog snare recorded from an actual real drum. It's quite a sort of soft thud. And then we can change to this second one, which is much higher in pitch, much sharper, much brighter. And again, if I do the 2 bars of one, 2 bars of the other, you'll be able to hear the difference. Bright, dull. And when you add in the other elements, it's the contrast and how it blends. Now, one's not right or wrong. It's just, it makes a difference to how the whole thing sounds, and you have to think about that. So those snares have the same placement, the same shape, but the bright clap really cuts through the mix, making the backbeat really pop, while the dull one gives a more chill vibe. It's subtle, but it does make a difference. The same thing can happen with other elements of your groove, like the kick. You can have a really harsh thumping kick or a soft, longer kick. And again, it affects the whole groove. Whether you use a sharp, punchy attack or one that's more of a soft sort of thumper, it depends which fits your vibe. And that depends a lot on your groove, but also your bass line and the story you're telling. You've really got to try and blend them all together. You can't choose one aspect of your drum groove in isolation. You have to listen to them all together. Okay, so I've got the original kick and I've added in a bass line. And it sounds like this. I've deliberately chosen quite a soft, rounded bass sound. And the original kick is quite a hard attack, and I think those two complement each other quite well. If we decide to go with a softer kick, combined with that sort of soft bass, does that work? I mean, it's okay. For me, you lose the kick a bit, the bass becomes more prominent, and maybe that's what you want. What about if we went to a really sort of long, boomy 808 style kick, which is going to be soft, but it's also going to have quite a long tail? Does that work? No, it doesn't. And the main reason for that is because they are interfering with each other. The kick is too long. It's also got too much of a tone. So it's playing a note that is then interfering with the bass, so you can't hear one or the other. It just becomes this sort of muddy sound. So the original kick chosen to go with that bass line. Quick attack, it's short, gives the bass time to come through and to add to the groove. They all have a purpose. So when you're auditioning drum sounds, don't just think about whether they sound good. Ask yourself, how does the tone affect the groove? Because it does. The roll. What is the purpose of each sound? And no, I don't mean roll as in drum roll. I mean what role does each sound play in your groove? Let me show you what I mean. So I've now got a full loop. I have added in another hi-hat layer and a couple of hat and shaker loops. Now I've thought about accent and groove and timing, so this is the loop that I'm now happy with, having taken into account all of those 5 foundations of house groove. So if I take out the 2 loops that I've added them to add a bit more energy and to fill out the sound spectrum. But what role do they have really? Let's take them out and see how it sounds. So without them, the groove still sounds like the groove. It's still got the swing, it's still got the rhythm and the feel. So what are these adding? Why did I put them in? Well, without the shaker loops, it loses some of the brightness. It doesn't sound quite as full, but the beat is still grooving. That means that those loops, the role of those shaker loops is more decorative. It's adding texture, but it's not driving the grooves, as opposed to the hi-hats. But if I mute the hi-hats, the whole groove falls apart, because the hi-hats are core to driving this groove. They're driving the energy, and every sound in your beat has a role, and you've got to understand that. Is it aesthetic, like the shakers, or is it functional, like the kick and the hi-hats? Understanding this will help you build grooves that work and avoid overloading them with unnecessary layers. So what if I mute the hi-hats and we'll keep the layers in? We'll keep the shaker loops in. Like for me, the whole loop loses something. You've still got a bit of rhythm and groove from the shakers, but compared to, well, again, let me take them out for 2 bars and see what you think. Just got that accent on the open hi-hat. That just adds the whole groove that I was going for. Now, you may want a different feel, but in this case, that is key to making this work. Right, I wanted to say one more thing on layering. A lot of YouTube videos seem to place a huge emphasis on adding layers, and if your drum programming is only basic and has 5 or 6 key elements, then you are an amateur, and if you have 20 elements in your drums, you're a pro. I don't think that's true. Adding layers and layers and layers for the sake of it can get you into trouble. Let me show you what I mean. So sound is actually a wave. So every single hit is a wave that is going into your ears. And because it's a wave, if you change the timing of that wave or you change the shape of that wave, they interfere with each other. And if you put a sound that is exactly opposite to one of the sounds in your groove, then it will actually cancel it out. It's called phase cancellation. And by adding more and more layers, you're in real danger of affecting the sound that comes out and hits your audience's ears. So let me demonstrate. I have 2 hi-hats here. They are exactly the same sound at the same time. And it sounds like that. Now, if I change the phase of each of them, so what I've done is inverted them. So one sound is now the exact opposite of the other sound. So I've got two layers, should be twice as much volume. And in this case, obviously, I've deliberately done it so that it's the exact opposite sound. But this can happen with different types of samples if you just keep layering and layering them. What happens now? I've got twice as many layers. It should be twice as loud, but because it's completely out of phase, they're cancelling each other out, and you can't hear it. So they are being triggered, and you can see down at the screen this sample is making a sound, and it is coming out, but because it's being combined with the exact opposite sound, you can't hear anything. If I take off one of the phases, you're back. Okay. So apologies for the physics lesson there, but sound is a wave, and adding more and more waves on top of each other, more and more layers, you are in danger of phase cancellation and getting a sound which is not what you intended. So more layers is not necessarily better. All right, so here's the takeaway. Timing, accent, length, sound selection, and roll, the 5 pillars of groove. Master these and you'll have complete control over how your tracks feel, whether it's a laid-back, chill vibe or a high-energy dance floor banger. These tools will get you there. If this video helps you out, do me a favor, hit the like button and subscribe for more videos. And hey, if you want to dive deeper into music production, then check out this next video, which YouTube thinks you'll like. And YouTube's pretty smart. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.